Ida was a lonely woman who lived on the outskirts of the village. She had been married twice, but she was never able to have children. Her first husband left her for his mistress, and later Ida discovered that the mistress was pregnant with his child. Her second husband was a good man, but Ida let him go when she learned that she would never be able to conceive, wanting to give him the chance to start a new family where he could have his own children. So Ida lived for many years in solitude. The presence of the neighborhood children brightened up her days a little, even though she didn't have any of her own. She loved children dearly. She spent a lot of time at her neighbor Bridget's house, especially because Bridget didn't particularly enjoy staying at home. Bridget was always off to the city or somewhere else, constantly searching for a better life. The whole village knew that she had 3 children from different men, but Bridget was not bothered by it at all. On the contrary, she even made fun of other women, telling them to keep an eye on their husbands because if she got bored, she would quickly captivate them. The women would scold her, but Bridget found it amusing. Once a beauty, Ida always attracted attention from men, even married ones. That's how Ida ended up looking after Bridget's 3 children while Bridget lived her life. Ida never complained, she enjoyed being with the little ones. There was 8-year-old Ariel, who was very bright for her age, 5-year-old Martin, and 2-year-old George. Today, Ida was planning to visit her neighbor to check on the children. She went to the local store to buy something sweet for tea. But while at the store, she accidentally overheard a conversation between 2 women discussing the fact that Bridget had abandoned her children and gone somewhere. Ida intervened in their conversation and tried to find out more details. It turned out that the last time anyone had seen Bridget was yesterday, running to catch a bus to the city. "How can this be?" exclaimed Ida. "So, the children have been on their own since yesterday? What kind of mother is she?" One of the women mentioned that the eldest daughter, Ariel, had come to her house earlier in the morning and asked how to cook pasta. "Poor girl, so young, yet already trying to take care of her younger brothers," Ida said. Without waiting to hear more, Ida hurried to the children. Before reaching their house, she could already hear loud children's cries. She quickened her pace and entered the house, freezing on the doorstep. George was sitting in the middle of the room, crying loudly. The older brother was trying his best to cheer him up, but he wasn't doing well. Meanwhile, Ariel was frantically searching through the drawers. The girl said, "My darlings, don't cry. I'll find the pasta soon, and I'll cook you the most delicious breakfast. Just wait a little longer." Ida didn't wait a second longer. She picked up George and told Ariel to take Martin and go to her house. She had already prepared lunch, so the kids would be able to eat without waiting. The girl lowered her eyes, obeyed her neighbor, and let go of the search for macaroni, taking her younger brother by the hand. As this group made their way to Ida's house, almost all the neighbors came out onto the street. They all felt sorry for the children, but they didn't understand why Ida was taking such responsibility upon herself. The neighbors silently watched and shook their heads. Ida's house was clean and smelled of delicious food. The children were very pleased by this. Soon, the little ones were fed, washed, and the brothers were happily playing on the couch. Ariel helped the neighbor clear the table and wash the dishes. She was a very industrious girl, despite being so young. In the evening, after dinner, the children went to bed and the woman began telling them interesting stories to help them fall asleep quickly. Soon, only the sound of breathing could be heard, and Ida also lay down to rest. Sleep eluded her as she kept thinking about what could have driven Bridget to abandon her children like that and go somewhere. Then she remembered the rumors she had heard at the store. The women gossiped that a construction crew had recently come to the village to restore the local church. Upon learning that men had arrived from the city, Bridget immediately showed interest in them. She was particularly fond of Michael, a tall and handsome middle-aged man with a great sense of humor. Bridget also caught Michael's attention, and he began courting her. They were often seen together, and the villagers speculated that Bridget would probably soon have another child. They believed she had found yet another father for a new baby. However, Michael was not foolish. He made sure Bridget didn't get pregnant. He knew about her 3 children and made every effort to prevent her from having a 4th. This deeply upset Bridget. She used all sorts of tricks to try to conceive, hoping to bind the man to herself. She was very much infatuated with him and wanted to prove her neighbors wrong, as they claimed no decent man would want to live with her. However, after a month, when the repairs were completed, the entire construction crew packed up and left. Michael left with them without even saying goodbye to his beloved. This greatly devastated Bridget. And a month later, she left too. Did she really leave to find that Michael? Ida wondered. Lost in her thoughts, the woman didn't realize when she fell asleep. And Bridget did indeed leave for the city in search of Michael. After preparing food for the children, she ordered them to stay home and not go anywhere. If anything happened, she would ask the neighbor to look after them. She rushed out of the house and set off to find her beloved. It's unknown how she learned Michael's address, but a few hours later she was already knocking on his door. As soon as the door began to open, she threw herself into the man's arms, shouting with joy. "Michael, I found you. My love, why did you leave me without even telling me you were leaving? How could you? I was so worried, couldn't sleep at night, missed you so much." The man pushed her away and said, "I don't know what you made up in your head, but I never promised you anything. We had a little fun, enjoyed ourselves, everything was great. Thank you for that. But don't expect anything more. I won't agree to it. I'm not foolish enough to take on someone else's children. I abandoned my own, and I have no intention of supporting yours, let alone having more. I don't like children, and I don't want them in my life. You're not a bad woman, but you're too cunning. Before I know it, you'll bring your children here, and then you'll have a few more. No, you better go back home and live with your children." Bridget started to convince him, saying, "Michael, children are not a problem at all. They won't be here. I'll make an arrangement with the neighbor, she'll look after them. She doesn't have children of her own, so she'll be delighted. Whenever I need to, I send my children to her. She's a kind old lady who has never refused." The man pondered for a moment. "Well, if you're so eager to live with me, then do as you planned. But let me warn you right away, you better not get pregnant, or I'll kick you out of my apartment in an instant." Saying this, he gave her such a malicious look that the woman understood he was serious and not joking. But she didn't want to let go of such a good fiancé. She was deeply infatuated with him. Bridget was delighted and promised to sort everything out with the children. She would talk to Ida. Maybe she'll give her some money. She already imagined herself moving in with Michael, finding a great job, and living happily ever after. She left her belongings at Michael's place and went back to the village. Without even going home to check on the children, Bridget went straight to her neighbor's house. Ida greeted the absent mother with reproach. "How could you abandon the children? Where were you? The children were sitting there hungry while you decided to pursue your personal life. Why did you even have them, and so many of them?" Bridget interrupted her neighbor and said in a gentle voice, "Ida, please don't shout. Life is such that what can you do? I need to find my place in this world. That's why I want to be with Michael, but there's a small problem. He doesn't want to live with my children. He sees them as an inconvenience. So, I wanted to ask you to look after them while I live with him. Maybe then I can persuade him to change his mind. I can't be without him, you understand? Besides, you live alone anyway. The children know you, they're used to you. If you don't agree, I'll send them to an orphanage. I'm determined. I'll do anything to live with Michael. Please, don't refuse to help me. I won't find such a good man again. I don't want to let this opportunity slip away." Bridget cried and pleaded, almost on her knees. The neighbor was about to refuse, but at that moment, the children rushed out upon hearing their mother's voice. Ariel, the daughter, seemed to understand everything at once. She pulled her younger siblings towards Ida. They stood behind her and embraced her. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. She turned to them and hugged them as well. Bridget witnessed all of this and ran away. She realized that the neighbor wouldn't abandon the children. And now her conscience was at ease. For 3 years, Ida had been taking care of the children. At first, Bridget made some effort to show a little interest in her children, but eventually, she disappeared completely. Ida only knew what the gossiping ladies at the store had told her, nothing more. They said that Bridget's life was still in turmoil. She had tried several times to get pregnant by Michael, but it only angered him. The last time, he beat her so badly that she ended up in the hospital. After examining her, the doctors informed her that she wouldn't be able to have any more children. Bridget accepted the news without any emotions. She had wanted to use a child to bind the man to her, but constant abuse had worn her down. After some time, she left Michael for another man. Then her trail went cold, and no one heard anything about her anymore. Ida was happy. She loved having the children with her. Ariel grew up to be an excellent helper, and the woman couldn't imagine what she would do without her. The younger brothers were cheerful and mischievous boys who always lifted Ida's spirits. Neighbors often asked her, why did she take on such responsibility, but Ida always waved them off, saying she couldn't imagine her life without these children. The only thing that worried her was her age. She realized that she wasn't young anymore and that something could happen to her at any moment, leaving the children completely alone. Lately, she often shared her concerns with her friend Karen, who tried to reassure her, insisting that she had a long life ahead of her. Today, Ida decided to distract herself from gloomy thoughts and began asking her friend about her son. "I haven't seen your Arnold in a while. Does he no longer come to visit his mother?" she asked. Karen sighed and replied, "He will be coming soon for good. He got involved with a bad girl, unfaithful and fond of hopping into other people's beds. Yesterday, he caught her with her lover right in bed. He called me and said he would come to stay with me for a week to forget about this situation. But I'm going to try to convince him to stay with me permanently. I've even found him a job today. We have a vacancy for an ambulance driver. So you'll soon be seeing Arnold almost every day." The friends chatted a bit more, and Ida headed home to her children. Time went by, and Ida continued to care for the children. But one day, she fell seriously ill. Ariel ran around her, not knowing what to do, as Ida's condition worsened and her temperature skyrocketed. The girl then decided to run for the doctor, not waiting until the woman's condition deteriorated further. On duty that day was Candy, a new paramedic who had just moved here. She appeared to be no older than 30. Many men had started paying attention to her, but she rejected them all. Candy knew how to stand up for herself and even fend off overly persistent guys. She listened to the breathless girl and immediately called the ambulance station to request a vehicle. Upon arriving at Ida's place, she quickly examined her and made a decision. The woman needed to be urgently hospitalized. Without wasting a minute, they placed Ida on a stretcher and carried her into the ambulance. On the way to the hospital, the girl started asking the driver about the children she had seen with their grandmother. To her surprise, the driver turned out to be Arnold, and he shared the family's sad story with the girl. The rest of the journey, Candy remained silent. Her face showed that she was contemplating something. When they arrived back in the village, Arnold asked where to drop off the girls since it was the end of his shift. To the boys' surprise, Candy asked to be taken to Ida's house. After much thought, she decided to take the children with her, at least until Ida recovered. Thus, the little ones changed their place of residence for the third time. After some time, shifts for Candy and Arnold coincided again, and they started talking. Their previous trip had brought them closer. Meeting for the second time, they conversed like old friends. And suddenly, Arnold asked, "Candy, may I ask you a personal question? I apologize if it's impolite, but I want to understand why you took Ida's children in. It's one thing if it was just one child, but there were 3 of them." Candy immediately became melancholic and told him that she herself was from an orphanage and had always dreamed of having a family. Throughout her life, she had always had to fight for someone's love, and she understood these children very well, feeling sorry for them. Additionally, she had gone through a failed marriage and the loss of a child. She couldn't carry the baby, and it happened because of her husband's fault. The verdict of infertility was the final straw, and they divorced. To start a new life, she quit her job in the city and came here. When she saw the children, she was immediately struck by a powerful emotion. She felt a deep connection to them from the first glance. Perhaps the fact that her unborn child would be the same age as the youngest of the children had an influence on her feelings. Overwhelmed by the rush of memories, the girl began to cry. Arnold tried to comfort her and embraced her. She raised her tear-filled eyes to him and, driven by emotions, kissed Arnold. Soon, Candy and Arnold formed a family. The children continued to live with them. A couple of years later, they had an addition to the family. Candy gave birth to another daughter, Molly. She was overjoyed because the doctors had given her an incorrect diagnosis. Thus, Arnold became a father of multiple children. 15 years later, they married off the eldest, Ariel. Like her mother, she pursued a career in medicine, where she met her future husband. The whole village celebrated the occasion. Naturally, Ida attended the wedding. The children always remembered their grandmother with love and were grateful to her for not abandoning them to fate. In the midst of the festivities, a woman stopped by the fence. Ida was the first to notice her. Recognizing her, she hurried towards her before anyone else noticed. "Bridget, I didn't expect to see you here," Ida said. "How could I not come? My own daughter is getting married. I wanted to see how my children are doing, how they've grown." "After all, I am their mother," Bridget replied. "What kind of mother are you? You abandoned them and didn't even show any interest in their lives all this time. So get out of here before I call the children's father. Otherwise, you'll be forced out by strength," Ida said. Bridget muttered something about how unfair life was, turned around, and walked away. No one saw her there again.